For those who are looking to say that the Navy said this, we hate to break it to you, but our show is not affiliated with the U.S. Navy in any way.
This show is by and for active and former sailors to have a place to express their own opinions and beliefs.
Hello, I am CTT1 Battaglia.
And I am CTR3 Sorolla. Welcome to What the Navy,
where we talk about the good, bad, and ugly of everyday Navy and real life issues. Join us as we delve into the deep ocean that is our world. Good evening, everyone. I am CTC1 Battaglia, and welcome to the very first special episode of What the Navy, where we will have our very own Directorate leader, Commander Mason, and Senior Chief Jagger, our Director ESL. So, with that being said, ma'am, welcome to the show. This is our very first episode. We're all very nervous. Hopefully, you aren't. And we're going to get right into it. So, ma'am, can you give us a little bit of your background, please? Ma'am, you are muted. You're muted.
First off, technical difficulties.
Glad it wasn't me.
It's the small things. What I was saying when I was muted is that I just really appreciate the invitation. I really do thank you for inviting me to be a part of your very first podcast. I do really, truly appreciate it sincerely, and I thank you for the opportunity. So a little bit about me. Is that the question? Tell
yes,
me
ma'am.
about yourself. So a long story short, so I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan. I am my mother's oldest child of 6. So in the household, I'm the oldest of 6 kids. I would say that I had interesting but very fun childhood. A lot of that entailed being the second parent for my younger siblings because, like I said, I'm the oldest of 6 kids. My mom would have to work a lot, so a lot of the parenting sometimes when she was at work would fall on me. And I probably overstepped that boundary a little bit because if you ask my siblings today, they would probably say that I still boss them around or I still act like their mother, even though they're all grown. So some of those habits just don't go away. I have been called bossy in the past because of, that upbringing, but really looking out for my siblings. So a part of who I am in the Navy and who I've been throughout my career is really centered around that. I have a very, very close knit family. My family, my siblings and I are extremely close. So there are 3 younger sisters and I have 2 younger brothers. Like I said, from those are all of my mother's children. But then on my dad's side, I do have an older sister and a younger brother. And I would just say that we are a close knit blended family, if that makes sense for some people. I'm very fortunate to have a mom that really, it doesn't matter who your mother is, who your father is, we are all one family. And she's been very intentional about making sure that we understand that and that we look out for each other and that we love one another. So I would say that coming into the Navy, I joined the Navy when I was 18 years old. Coming into the Navy, I had an extremely strong foundation. I had a really strong family ties. And this year, in a couple of days, I'll celebrate 27 years in the Navy. Those ties have not gone away. They've only gotten stronger through the years. And I would just say family first is really a mantra for my entire family. And that's what I would say about my upbringing. So I joined the Navy in 1993. I graduated from high school on one week. The following week, I was gone into the Navy. I was in the delayed entry program for a year. I joined delayed entry when I was in the 11th grade. So I knew at graduation what I was going to do. So I think that took a little bit of pressure off of me during that last final high school year. I already knew I was going to join the Navy. And my first career milestone in the Navy, I was a CB. So I was an electrician for the first 6 years of my Navy career. And I would say I look back on those days and I think about them a lot because I had a great time when I was a CB. I really enjoyed that community. During the time that I joined the Navy, females could not go on in the deployable units. So there were CB units that deployed, but when I joined, I could only basically go to shore duty. So I spent my first tour in Guantanamo Bay, and then I did my second tour in Atsugi, Japan. So both shore duties. And I had an awesome time, I think, during those young enlisted years. I was fortunate. I came in the Navy as an E3, you know, so where are my folks? I came in the Navy as an E3, and by the time I got accepted into the Seaman to Admiral program, I had made E5 by the time. So around the same time, I made E5, and then I got selected right around the same time. So that was all during my first enlistment. For CBs at the time when we joined the Navy, you had 5 years enlistment right off the bat. So at the 5 years, and then I set goals for myself in the Navy. So it was a commitment I made to myself. I said, if I don't make E5 in my first enlistment, then the Navy's not for me and I'm getting out. And so as it got closer and closer to the 5 year, I was like, whoa, so I'm actually going to get out. You know, I have been going to school, I have been working on my associate's degree, but still I had that pressure on myself because I felt like if I didn't do it in the time frame, then I should probably move on. Maybe the Navy wasn't for me. And so around the same time, I made E5 and I got picked up for the Seaman Admiral program at the same time. So I don't know how long you want me to talk because I'll just go forever. But that's about me, my background. Tell me when to stop. Tell me when to go. This is your floor.
Ma'am, you can talk as much as you need and as much as you want. I love hearing sea stories.
Oh, no. I heard you say, oh, what were you about to say? It's not your stories from old people.
I will be expecting my counseling shit when I come back.
Yeah. Put that on the list. You got to get that done.
Ma'am, you only been talking for a minute and a half.
It felt like forever, so just
I think it's been a little longer than a minute and a half.
Exactly.
And just so you know, ma'am, I could hear my wife giggling downstairs right now from that. So she's having a great time right now, watching me go red. So, I mean, so you've had one heck of a career, ma'am. 27 years. That is
Still
a
kicking.
lot of time in the service of our nation, and definitely thank you for your service, all the time that you spent in the Navy. Now we're gonna have to transition to that difficult topic that everybody in the world is talking about.
Before we do that, let's hear from Senior Jagger too.
Okay. Senior.
I mean, we don't have to. I mean, I'm all good.
Senior was more than happy not to.
Right?
He looked like he didn't want to.
No, well, that's the thing. You know, I finally got the video working, so we'll see how it goes from there. No, I'll keep it short and sweet. No, kind of like Commander Mason. I was the oldest of 3 children. Growing up, I actually joined the Navy because I was looking for some sort of direction, some sort of, you know, that calling of joining something larger than myself, looking for something, you know, that you could actually, you know, dedicate yourself to and, you know, actually feel like you were, you know, doing something more worthwhile than, you know, a 9-to-5 job, just getting a paycheck, that sort of thing. I've spent most of my time DURSUP. They finally did get me for a national tour this time around, so. But you know, I've enjoyed it. No, I just hit 18 years just about a month ago. So I've got a couple more years, and then I'll be heading back to civilian life. But no, I was born in Arkansas. My family was definitely on the hippie side. We had a midwife, and so my brother, my sister, we were all born at home. I actually ended up getting wrapped up and ended up in the hospital towards the end. But, you know, we spent about 3 days in Arkansas, and then my father was Merchant Marine, so we moved all over the country. So I never really called anywhere home until we settled my middle school years in South Carolina. So I consider South Carolina home. That's where I joined the Navy, and like I said, here in a couple of years, when I wrap up my time, we'll be heading back that way. But no, it's been a great time, and yeah, looking forward to this discussion and many more in the future.
Thank you, Senior. Chief, we might as well just go around the table. So go ahead, Chief.
Hey, as such, Senior Chief, glad to have you. Thank you for being our second guest speaker. Hey, before we continue the conversation, is everyone the oldest of their siblings? Because I'm the
No.
oldest.
I'm the oldest.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure that coincidence wasn't there. Hey, real quick, and as we continue this podcast, we'll talk about ourselves. The host will talk more about ourselves. But I'm Frank Peavy. Sailors know me, or excuse me, service members know me as Chief Peavy. Been in for almost 15 years now. Been to a couple of ships, and I just came from instructor duty, which was super satisfying. If anyone is considering doing that, and now I'm in really interesting command. This is the first command that I've been a chief at, and it's also the largest command that I've been at. Super satisfying to be doing things like this with sailors at 1800, 1830. I'll be honest, I've never done anything like this. So thank you for the opportunity, and you can go ahead, CTT1.
Thanks, Chief. So, like Chief said, we'll hold off on the rest of the introductions till towards the end. So we'll transition into the topic that everybody's talking about out there in the world. Captain Means just did her show earlier today at 10 o'clock. I don't know if anybody was able to catch that episode. Chief, I know you were able to. Commander, were you able to?
Yes, I was a participant as well. I called in from my cell phone.
Okay. Anyways, so ma'am, as I was saying before, you've been in the Navy a long time, and there have had to have been many incidences of racism, discrimination, or any microaggressions that you might have seen. How did those incidents impact you as a sailor, as an officer, throughout your career?
Okay, I would have to say, and for me, I will try not to get emotional, because sometimes when I think back on some of the instances, it's pretty painful when I think about it now, today, and where I was during that time frame. I would have to say, from my own personal experiences, from the time that I went to boot camp and then to my CB shore duties, both in Guantanamo Bay and when I went to Atsugi, I can honestly say that as, a junior sailor, E3, E4, E5, I never really felt the disparity. I can say that I felt like, okay, if you go to work, you work hard, you do what you're supposed to do, you stay out of trouble, you can become successful. And specifically when I went to Atsugi, I was I was the only female in my unit for a significant amount of time. And there were very few minorities in that unit. And I could say that it was known that I was a woman, right? It was known that I wasn't a man, but I never felt ostracized, and I never felt like I was singled out. I know one part of it, I worked extremely hard because CBs, you always run together, right? So I did not want to be the only female falling out of a run. So I used to run 2-3 times a day to make sure that I could keep up with my male counterparts. Because for me, PT was a big thing. It's a big thing for CBs. So for me, that would have set me apart in a negative way. So I made sure that I did what I needed to do on my off time so that I would not be ostracized or, spoke about in a negative fashion. So I would say that that's the beginning of my career. When I got selected for the Seaman to Admiral program, I went to college for 3 years. And so for 3 years, I was just really away from the Navy. My first introduction back into the Navy. I went to what they call, I was a surface warfare officer at the time, and I went to Baby SWAS, right? That's where all the young ensigns go up in Rhode Island, and anyone who that transfers into the community, you all go there and basically learn how to be a divo. You do all these simulations and, you know, learn how to drive a ship in a simulated environment, et cetera. So after going there, I went to my first ship. And so mind you, at this point in my career, I've been on active duty for 9 years. This is the first time that I stepped foot on a ship as my command, right? So I had went to visit a ship before. I had went to visit the Kitty Hawk and took a tour, but I had never been a part of a ship's company. I had never been on a ship as part of my everyday functions in and out. And I could say today that looking back on that time, that was probably one of the most difficult times in my career, right? So you hear that the surface warfare officer community is very tough, it's difficult. It depends on who your leadership is. It depends on what type of mentorship you have in that environment. And being in that environment, that was really the first time that I felt like I was being ostracized, maybe because I didn't look like everyone else. Now, mind you, I had classmates. So I went to a historically Black college and university. I was part of a consortium with Old Dominion University, Norfolk State, and Hampton. And so when I got to my ship as an ensign, there were about 5 or 6 of us that came from that consortium. So we knew each other prior to. And there were a number of us that came that were African American, and we showed up on the ship. You know, we all excited. Hey, we're officers now. Many of them have been priors as well. And you feel excited, right? So I get there, my first department head is awesome. He's an awesome mentor, just really trying to sit down with us, let us know what we should be doing, how to pursue your qualifications. And then he left like 6 months later. I get another department head, and during that time frame, my best friend at the time, we were roommates, and they really didn't get along that well. But his demeanor towards us as officers, it was extremely negative. So at the time, I'm an ensign. I don't know if it's because we don't know. I still get emotional about it. So looking back on it from my standpoint today, you can't. It's different when it comes to microaggressions. It's difficult to pinpoint exactly what a person does that seems unfair or unjust. What I did know is that I felt like I was being treated differently, as well as some of the other officers felt like we were being treated differently when it came to the pursuit of our qualifications, you know, having certain jobs or getting certain, liberty when we got to ports. Those are the things that you feel as though you're being treated differently than the person next to you, right? So in the SWO community, you have to have a sponsor. So I don't know if you remember on the call today, someone mentioned sponsorship. When you're in that community, if your department head is not sponsoring you, meaning that in the group of all department heads, if you're not being put forward as an officer ready to pursue their qualifications or ready to go to the next level, then you're just forgotten about. Right? You're put to the side. No one is trying to pull you forward. No one is really trying to help you. So you're trying to help yourself. And in some cases, if you don't know what you should be doing, or if you don't know what you're doing wrong, then it's hard for you to correct yourself. And I would say as an ensign, I just felt like I didn't have that kind of support or mentorship. We didn't have any females at the time that were in leadership positions. I was the only one, and so were my peers. There was a lieutenant on board that was a female, but she was not respected at the leadership level. And so there were things that occurred. I saw peers of mine moving through their qualification process when I know they didn't work harder than I did, right? One of them was a roommate. She would be in her rack all the time. I was the commo. I was getting called all kinds times of the night. I was being called to the quarterdeck for this, called to the bridge, all these things. So you can't say that it's because this person is working harder than you are. And so it didn't prevent me from moving forward in the qualification. it prolonged the process for me, for other officers, my peers, those officers that we all showed up together. And what it does is it makes you feel undervalued. It makes you feel as if what you're doing is not important. And it makes you feel as though the people that are supposed to look out for you and really help to pull you along, they don't care about you. And so when I talk about that, when I talk about this topic and, you know, people ask, what can they do? I would just always say, evaluate how you treat every single person that works for you. Every single person. So it shouldn't matter whether I look like you or whether I'm from the same hometown you are, or if we went to the same college, if I went to the academy and you didn't. It shouldn't matter. We all should have the same level playing field. We all are doing very similar jobs. We all should be able to get the same type of mentorship. And I just felt like during that tour, it was me and there were others that just felt like we were the ones that were outside the circle of trust. And so being outside that circle of trust, it makes you feel demotivated, because regardless of how hard I worked, I didn't feel like I was going to get any further, any faster. So you find your motivation goes down, and it really does put a dampening on your spirit. That was the first time in my Navy career. And now, mind you, I'm in the Navy 19 years. That was the first time in my career that I really wanted to get out, right? I really wanted to make my exit at that time frame. And so it wasn't until the tour after that I got an awesome mentor and someone who really poured into me, into my career, talked to me about the things that I should be doing and what I should do next. And I also got corrected, right? Because I don't know everything. But somebody who can correct you, but doing it in a way that you know they're looking out for your benefit and not trying to degrade you or put you down for no reason. So yes, I can say that I've experienced it in those ways. And for some reason, I was able to endure during that time frame and move on to something else. There was one thing that this chief a long time ago, when I was still an E4, I met her in the bathroom, right? Because I had never saw really a woman chief before. So I was like, whoa, let me talk to this chief. And I said, well, how did you do it? You've been in the Navy so long. What happens if you work for somebody that you really don't like? Blah, blah, blah. And she said, well, the one thing that's good about the Navy, either you're going to transfer or that person is going to transfer. And so this is something that I learned as an E4. So I think that I've just been able to hold on to that as a constant, knowing that every command, every job that I go into, it's never going to be permanent, right? I always, either I'll get the opportunity to move on, or that person can get we'll move on eventually. But as I've become more senior, I've learned how to speak up for myself more, because I tell you, during that first tour, you're so afraid, right? You know that your captain can write you a bad fit rep and it'll put you out the Navy, right? All you have to do is not get qualified as a SWO and you're going home. It's just that easy. So when you live with that kind of fear on a daily basis, it's hard for you to really speak up for yourself. But now, if I had someone that I was mentoring through that situation, I have things that I would tell them that they should do. I would point them to SCPO. I would say, file a grievance against that supervisor. Or during that time frame, I had no mentorship. I had no one to talk to. So if I was making mistakes, I was making more of the same mistakes and not able to get over it, as it related to me becoming better in my job and performing better. Instead, it was just, I had a supervisor I didn't get along with, and everything else just, it was, until he moved on and I moved on, basically.
So,
yeah.
Hello, ma'am. I'm CTR3 Rolla. So kind of backing off of what you just said, what do you wish to tell sailors who don't understand why racism should be discussed and why it's not an issue that only minorities should care about? What do you think?
What I would say to that is that it impacts everyone, because So I'll tell you about that young ensign me, right? So if I had mentorship, if I had, leadership that cared about my progress, then what would have occurred? I would have become a better performer, and I would have been able to, increase my impact on mission. And so not doing that, what ends up happening, I wasn't terrible. I did my job every single day. But when I did my job, it was, if you're so unhappy, you don't perform at your peak level. When you know you have leadership that wants you to succeed and they're doing everything to help you succeed, you put in even more effort, right? You're trying to get it done. You'll stay up all night working on evals, fit reps, whatever it is, because you don't want that leadership to be disappointed in you. Instead of putting fear in people of what you would do to them or what you would do to their career, you just get better people, better performers, and people feel more like a team versus you have one or two that are receiving accolades or, they're performing great while the rest of your workforce is over in the corner, maybe sulking or unhappy. So when you build a team and camaraderie of people that really want to succeed together, then the mission gets done faster, more innovation. People are more, they're more invested. They want to be a part of the team. They want to do more. And people are just, you think about it, right? When you have a team that really has that synergy, they want to work together. They are excited to do something new. They're excited to come up with new ideas, not because they're afraid of failing, but because they want to do the best. They want to be the best that they can. So as a workforce, as a Navy across the board, when we have pockets of people that are unhappy and disgruntled, maybe because they're being treated unfairly or because, they feel as though, their leadership doesn't care about them, or if there is racism or bigotry going on in the shop or the command that they're at, they cannot perform at the highest level possible. So that means your team will never get the synergy that it needs. Yes, they'll perform, mission will get accomplished, but think about how much better mission can get accomplished. Think about how much more innovation would come if everyone's voice is heard equally, if everyone is given that opportunity to have that input. So it's not just the diversity, but to allow those voices to be heard, those ideas to be heard, the different perspectives to come into play, because we're all better together, right? We're better together. You have a different point of view than I have, and Chief PV has a different point of view than Senior Jagger. And when you put all of our ideas together, you can see it from all these different prisms. And I think that picture that you get is always that much better because we've already taken a look at all these other sides, right? So you can see, oh, maybe that won't work, but this will. Okay, let's adjust based upon all of our feedback. But if everything is only by one lens, then we are selling ourselves short.
That's the reason why we have 4 hosts and not 2 hosts, so we can just have different perspectives, So.
Absolutely.
Pastor Davis, you look like you want to say something.
Oh, I was contemplating my question and stuff, making sure it flows. But I do have a question for both ma'am and senior. When it comes to addressing topics as such like this, like, do you think as the military, we actually do go in depth with it? Like, because it is an uncomfortable topic, but it does need to be discussed, especially when there is, as far as like inequalities go, one race might feel more attacked, especially like instances, specific instances in the military in regards to like Black women and the way we might put our hair, especially how the military has guidelines on what hair colors are allowed, even though it is not specific to a race. There have been numerous incidences where a Black woman might have her hair within a regulation color, but yet it will be called out as faddish. Do you think that is like a topic that's more hard to discuss within the workspace, or for people to understand who don't go through that experience, why someone of color might be upset about something of that sort? And how do you go about addressing the issue?
Senior, did you want to talk first? I've been talking a lot, so I'm putting you.
I'll give you a break, ma'am. No, actually, I'll tell you, and this is not to say that, I think in any way, shape, or form that the Navy is perfect, but I will say that I think the Navy gives a very unique perspective and a very unique opportunity to really kind of push some of those narratives forward. That, because we really are such a microcosm of the societies that make up America, and because we come together in such, and our basic structure is unit. The fact, like ma'am said, we are a team. Everything that we do is moving towards a central goal, and so we don't function properly if there are, pieces of that team that either aren't working in the same direction or don't feel like they're being valued in there. And so, I do believe that because just kind of the way we're structured, that the Navy actually provides some of those opportunities to engage and have those, more difficult conversations than you would even have in the larger sense of like the U.S. Kind of social discussion, because you're talking about 300 million people, and how do you engage that larger group, and and in that larger group, you're talking about all those kinds of push and pulls, where in the Navy, they say, hey, look, this is good, this is right, we put it in we put it in regulation, and this is how we're going to go forward. Whether it's things like the SCPO program, whether it's things like making sure that everybody, we recognize the need to give everybody the same opportunities. I'll tell you, you bring up the example, especially, say women of color that, change their hair color, because I know we've had a couple of incidences here in this command, and it is an example where, sometimes it's very easy as military leaders to get in this very, kind of rigid, hey, this is the instruction, this is what it says, you read here that says this, and so this is what we're going to do. And sometimes, even as, progressive in some instances as the Navy has been, the military has been, that doesn't mean that we don't need and shouldn't take that step back and say, okay, I understand that this is what it says, but was that regulation written in a sense that didn't take some of those extra considerations? So yes, that may be the black and white of what the instruction says, but does that necessarily mean that it fits? So yes, that's difficult because we do have those regulations and it says this is what it is. But I do believe, and I think you've seen this command, a willingness to, okay, that may be the regulation, but let's have that conversation. Let's peel back that a little bit. Let's take a step back and actually look at what the right answer is, as opposed to, just what the regulation says. And so, it's always difficult. And, and I will say, and to give a, slightly different perspective from Commander Mason, because the fact is, and when it comes to especially conversations like this, we don't all have the same experiences. And so, and I'll tell you, when we were watching the speech this morning by the Commodore, and even, seeing Commander Mason get choked up a little bit, it's hard sometimes for those of us who have not experienced those things, to really understand, those things were years in the past, but they're still visceral, they're still real, to the people that have, suffered from them. And so, it is difficult. And I'll say for myself, it took a long time to, and I think it's difficult for people who are the benefactors of privilege to really understand, especially in this, current age, what that actually means. Because a lot of times you get, oh, well, I'm not racist, I'm not bigoted, I don't do those things. And I really do think that, and I really do hope that like these kinds of conversations and the willingness of, not just sailors, but also chain of command to have these conversations, it really does start to move those goalposts. And really, you really do start to, we do have to understand that, it's not enough to just, passively say, I'm not going to be, racist, or I'm not going to, hold someone back. But, and kind of like the Commodore speaking up about this morning, speaking up when you see someone else doing it. So, I do think, we're headed in the right direction. I think this command, and just by the nature of this command, we're more willing to have those conversations. Are we there? Absolutely not. But, I think as a society, and, we're all humans, we're all flawed in some ways, and, we've got a long way to go. But, I do think that, we have that ability. I think the next real step, and one of the reasons why, I'm a huge proponent of Navy training, because it's not just the repetitive nature of Navy training, but really especially when we talk about GMT and we talk about these programs, when we talk about SCPO, when we talk about the resolution systems, when we talk about, even just like the voting programs and that kind of stuff, it really comes down to empowering sailors. It comes down to making sure that people know what their rights are, and making sure that people, feel comfortable, really engaging and expecting that those rights will be upheld and will be, upheld actively by their leadership. So going, in nice big circles, yes, I do think those are difficult conversations. I do think that this command, and I think the Navy, by and large, is willing to have those conversations, but they've got to be brought up, and sailors have to be empowered to feel like they can bring those up for us to have those conversations.
So do you think this is something that needs to be like implemented in like the trainings that we do when it comes to racial discrimination and other inequalities of equal results or equal actions or impacts that other people might cause on someone else? Because a lot of people aren't aware that they are saying something or doing something that is a microaggression. I know, like you said, like regulations, but in my view, as a Black woman in the military, regulation is regulation. So to me, it's like, if that regulation says blonde hair, y'all better not say nothing to me about blonde hair because it's in the regulation. But that's the thing that's not happening. It's, oh, that's faddish. And of course, darker skinned women, anything that's lighter than us, it's going to stand out more. So do you think that's something that needs to be said in trainings? Because microaggressions are not something that people are aware that they are doing, or even aware of what microaggressions are.
Oh no, absolutely. Because and it's not just trainings. When we talk about the resolution system, one of the things that we've got to make sure too that people are empowered to understand that, hey, look, if someone says something that you find offensive, or rubbed you in that wrong way, you should feel comfortable enough to engage that person, or engage your leadership about, hey, look, this happened and it needs to be addressed. And that's what I talk about empowering. And I'll tell you, for years the Navy was shifting to doing a lot more of the computer-based trainings when it came to the GMTs. You clicked through the slides, you answered a couple of questions, and you moved on. And I really thought we were doing a disservice. And I really do like that in the last couple of years, we've started to move back into doing the in-person training, because things like that, things about how we actually engage each other, things about how we actually bring up those difficult conversations, you are not going to get that from a slide deck. You are not going to get that from going on NKO and clicking a couple of radio buttons. So it's all of it. It's it's making sure that the training happens. It's making sure that we're doing it face to face, so that because you can't ask the computer if you have that kind of question. And and it's making sure that people understand. I will say, I was and it may and maybe it's just a small group, but I was disappointed this morning when one of the questions to the Commodore was how do I resolve this issue. That should be one of those kind of core things that we teach going through basic training. Coming here, we repeat in GMT every year. And so if we still haven't really gotten that message across, and if everybody doesn't know how we move through those things, then clearly we still have more things to do in training. But to your question, I absolutely do think that it's key that we do that training in small groups, and that we do that training face to face, because that's the only way that we can engage and have those kinds of exchanges. And that's the only way we can move that discussion forward.
I've been thinking about this stuff for a little bit. I've been thinking about, what happens when the unprecedented protests and demonstrations stop, if we were going to still be talking about the stuff that we're talking about right now. I think about, Commander Mason mentioned by the time she was on that ship, it had been 9-10 years into her career. And correct me if I'm wrong, man, but you had a better experience when it came to being treated as an equal person when you were first in the first 10 years in your career compared to the next 10 years, right? So, or not next 10 years, but, toward the end, the 9th or 10th year. And, I wonder, I don't personally agree we are doing the training, the discussions justice right now. But I wonder how we would make sure these conversations continue, not just at the formal setting, right? Because I asked this to a bunch of people, oh, well, if the SCPO was doing their job, then we would be all good, and and we wouldn't be that, that's not the answer. That's a formal setting, that's not the answer, and that's not, even though we do these trainings every year, that sailor still had to ask, Commodore Means, how do we resolve it, right? It may be common sense to some, but it's not to others. But how do we, keep that going? And how do we keep progressing even after, the protests stop? And how do we keep that dialogue going? Because, it's easy enough to say, it's easy to say, oh yeah, we just need to keep talking about, and this isn't against anyone who, in this room, we need to keep talking about this, and we can't just do training, we have to have the conversation, but how do we ensure that conversation is being had for everybody? And I don't know if that's a question that, any one person can answer, but I've been thinking about, I don't want to lose sight of the good that's happening right now. And to just kind of change the direction real quick. Senior Jagger, Commander Mason, how do y'all personally feel about what's going on in society right now when it comes to the protests and the demonstrations?
So my personal views, I would have to say that watching protest, being a part of protest, it's all very uncomfortable for most people, right? So seeing it on the news day in, day out, seeing people run from police, being tear gassed or having rubber bullets shot at them. But what I would say, though, is that it's necessary, right? So the protests that are going on today, they are necessary, because for too long, it's been okay for people to be treated the way that they have. Now, I would say for Black people, for minorities just in general, to be treated the way that they have. So it's uncomfortable. It makes people look, right? It makes the conversations, make communities uncomfortable, but it has to be done. And I think the part that makes me the saddest about where we are today is that if you go back and you look at, George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd occurred basically on camera, filmed. Everyone saw it. And it happened, his life was taken as if it was just a normal day, So what makes me the saddest is that if you ever watch footage of the civil rights movement, if you ever watch footage of, the marches that were had during that time, this is not a movie, not a production, but actual footage of children trying to, integrate schools. What occurred? Police attacked innocent people that were protesting. There were children, teenagers who had dogs. The police dogs were sicked on them. Fire hoses were used. And so when did the civil rights movement happen? And so in 2020, to still be able to turn on your TV and see almost the exact same thing happen. Maybe it's not a dog, but a person being held, in a chokehold on the ground. And then when you pull back the onion of what actually occurred, should the police have even been involved in the situation at all, right? So at this point, I think that our communities are so exhausted of watching these events occur, exhausted of needing to explain why our communities are in the position that they're in, exhausted for the fact that I have to explain systematic racism. Why should I have to explain that over and over again? It should be clear as day as to what's going on in the communities, but it's been ignored. So I feel like the protests are necessary. It makes me sad to see something occurring in 2020 that occurred during the 60s, right? That's what makes me sad, to see that things have not changed. You feel like there were lives lost, the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, the assassination of Medgar Evers, the assassination of Malcolm X. You saw all these people lose their lives during that time frame. And then all these decades later, to be almost in the same position when it comes to the communities, and how the economic divide between the haves and have-nots, and the policing in communities of color. People are just tired. And when you feel frustrated, tired, exhausted because you have to always explain the why, sometimes there is no other method but to go into the streets and tell people and showcase how you feel, showcase that pain, because for some reason it has not been heard otherwise. For some reason it has not translated to be important enough for the entire country and the system to be transformed. It has not been important enough up to this date. So my opinion, it's necessary.
Thank you, ma'am. And
How do you feel? I was just going to ask Senior how you felt about what was going on.
Oh, no, look, I would absolutely agree with Commander Mason. I think it's absolutely necessary. When they say, writing is the voice of the unheard, when you ignore a situation for long enough, at some point it's going to come back and bite you, and really that's what you've seen, absolutely, through the 60s and 70s. We had that turmoil. We kind of went into a lull. We kind of, as a nation, convinced ourselves, oh, well, the problem's not as big as, some might think it is. You get in that kind of complacency and everything kind of settles. And so I completely agree with Commander Mason that, it's the turmoil, it's the upheaval that is needed to bring, that tension back to that. Because, I'm a huge fan of human history. And when you look back at not just American history, but when you look back at, the scope of human history, the unfortunate reality is we as human beings don't, we don't take on large change, we don't take on large change easily. We don't just say, oh, well, this is the right thing to do, and so, we're going to do it. A lot of times, those large steps forward, come in very painful ways, and they come in very disruptive ways. And so the idea of, oh, well, we can have this discussion without the protests. We can have this discussion without the riots. I disagree, and I agree with Commander Mason. Without the disruption, then it doesn't get to the point where enough people are thinking about it to where the kind of change that needs to happen actually does happen. I will, for those of you that know me, know I'm an eternal optimist. I'm always one of those that tries to look for that silver lining. And so, as much as I can understand how frustrating, it can feel, looking almost 50 years ago and seeing some of the same scenes play out, and and feel like we're not getting anywhere, we're in the same place. I don't feel that same pain, but I can understand the frustration. So I will say the only silver line I can say in that is that, I do see that upheaval. I do see that, that kind of friction that I think is necessary to actually, move forward in a significant enough way that, hopefully we're not here, having the same discussion 30 years from now.
And I agree. It's definitely harder for people who don't experience something to really fully 100% understand. An experiment that I saw is about a school teacher named Jane Elliott. I'm not sure if either one of you guys have ever heard of her. She's just a normal school teacher. She came up with an experiment called the blue and brown eye experiment. She created this exercise right after Martin Luther King was assassinated in 1968, which is crazy because it's like, that's really not far along, like at all whatsoever. And pretty much the experiment was she taught the children what it felt like to be on the other side of segregation. She saw her third graders flip and have a whole different type of attitude towards each other just from what is being said, and how things are being viewed, which I think is something that America has a very big part in playing when it comes to groups of minorities and Black people as well. I'm just going to speak just for a lot of Black people because American history, come on, slavery, mainly Black people here in America itself. So I say, like, people need to, not even just people, especially when it comes to racism. Someone asked me, what is the solution? I'm like, well, it's not going to be overnight. It's probably not going to be in the next 5 years. It's obviously not in the next 60 years because look at where we're at right now. I feel like it's a generational thing that needs to be taught. And that's the difference between victims and those who've never experienced it, is because it's not something that they ever had to go through. So it's not something that's being taught to the next generation. Like, as a Black person, we're automatically taught at a very young age, hey, when the cops show up, this is how you need to act. When you're at this place, you need to learn how to switch it up. You need to learn how to simulate into this, the area that you're in, so they don't view you as such a way or a negative annotation that we've been portrayed as throughout history. So I feel as though that's something that needs to be said. That's something that needs to be taught to younger people, and even not just the younger people. There are adults that I have met that they've told me their stories, and they're like, to be honest with you, I've never even seen like really a person of color until I joined the military, which is sad because America's a big melting pot. And I didn't even know there was places in America itself that still existed where you only see just those who are the color of your skin. And I was very shocked at that. So what I'm trying to say is, like, people need to educate, and they need to learn how to educate themselves as well. And that's something that I feel as though that's not happening. And that's why we still have what's going on today. That's why we still have incidences that happen even in the workforce or outside of the workforce. So it's hard for people to come up and speak up and say, hey, this happened to me, or put in a complaint of some sort without someone who is that backbone for them to actually say, no, you need to put a complaint in. This is bad, because they're afraid of being attacked already because of the color of their skin. And so I just wanted to share her for those who are watching right now. And if you haven't heard, Jane Elliott, perfect person to look up, in a perfect way to really see exactly how discrimination, how verbal abuse can change and make that from verbal abuse to physical abuse, behavioral abuse, and how that continues on and how that plays a part in our history. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Davis. Ma'am, I'm going to get to a chat question real quick, and this can be both for you and Senior. Chris Waller writes, what ways do you want and expect leadership/peers to facilitate breaking the ice on addressing the racism and equality concerns at a local level to understand and motivate sailors? Thank you, Chris.
And that question was for me. Is that what you said?
It's open for both of you, ma'am. And,
Oh, okay.
And Chief, too, because he's an LCPO.
Right. So I'll let Chief, you can go first.
So you wanna
All right, sure. So I'll tell you. Yeah, so I'll tell you. You know, and I do come back to this because I look, because I understand. You go through, and I've been in the Navy for 18 years. And you go through the same trainings and the same trainings and the same trainings. But I will keep saying, I really do believe that Navy training has a piece in that, and it's not the CBTs. It's the as leaders, whether that is as an LPO, whether that's as an assistant LPO, whether that's as a chief, whether that's as a division officer. It really is, engaging at the deck plate level, making sure that your sailors understand what their rights are. And the fact that, and in fact, I want to tie this back to the question that Chief Peavy asked earlier about, how do we make sure that this conversation continues? And it's incumbent upon, those that, are in positions of leadership. And it's incumbent upon, even you guys, as you move up and you have the opportunities to fill LPO roles and you take on collateral duties and you move to new commands, that you don't let this conversation die. So, I mean, honestly, the best way, whether it's as leadership or whether it's as sailors, that we keep this going is to just have the conversation, is to not get stuck behind our computer screens, to not look at things like quarters or GMTs as just another check in the box. Those really are opportunities for us to come together in those, small units, usually where we're working together, towards the same operational goal. And so we should have that opportunity, and we should be comfortable enough with each other in those small units to have those conversations. So, as leaders, it really is our responsibility to make sure that that is communicated when we do the training, and that we allow that space for those kinds of questions to come up so that this conversation can continue.
All right, Senior, thank you for letting me gather my thoughts. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. We talk about the local level. I proposed the question to a group that I'm a part of. I asked, I said, is it now necessary for us to have normal discussions about race, color, religion, sex, gender, or gender identity? Are we going to that point? And are we going to that point to have healthy conversations about that, if for no other reason, just to get to know the next person, just to get to know the next sailor? Because, is it necessary? Let me put it this way: is what we know as a healthy work environment, or healthy working environment, a healthy working environment? Is it truly healthy, right? So the definition of healthy working environment is to, you have motivated people who are good producers, and the work is effective and efficient and all of that stuff. Is it possible to maximize the potential of people if you don't know them, and if they know that you don't know them, and if it's just about work? So I asked that question. Is there a need to redefine what a healthy working environment is, and to have those type of conversations? And some of the responses that I got, pointed to, no, that's never going to happen. Just kind of take a look at society, take a look at the nation as a whole. It's not going to happen. It's impossible. It's too grand, right? No one person can control, or not control, but influence, this mass of people. And I agreed with them, but it doesn't have to start from the top down, right? It can start from the bottom up. And my suggestion to basically solving most things in my own experience is to just get to know people and to just get to know what is important to them. And you will talk to somebody, you will have conversations with people where this is important to them, right? This thing that you may not think about in yourself as important to you, but it's important to them, right? And it's important for you to know that, and it's important for that person to know that and you care about those things, right? And this is not to take away from the topic, but that I think that is universal. Just get to know the next person, and what's important to them. I don't personally believe a healthy work environment involves a bunch of robots that don't know each other but can produce a lot. We have to have these conversations, and we don't really have a choice but to have these conversations. So yeah, that's my opinion when it comes to what is expected at the local level. Just learn your sailors, right? And I'll do my best to learn you.
All right, so I would agree with both of you. And just to take it a step further, I know we talked about training a little bit earlier. So when we think about local level, small group, I am a huge fan of scenario-based training. I am a huge fan of just having reenactment of situations. And so sometimes I feel like, just as people in general, we don't know or understand the way something that we say affects the next person, because as Chief Phoebe say, we don't know them, right? We don't know their background. We haven't gone that far. And so I think to have training that was inclusive of scenarios, it will, and when people see it played out, and I've seen this training done with, SAPR, FAP events as well, where people can see it illustrated in a format that's easier to understand than just, someone standing up saying or talking about an event, but they see how it's played out, and you have people that show the reaction. I think that is also a way of having a conversation, but also showing and demonstrating how something you say could be a microaggression or it could be offensive. So I think that that's a valuable way to continue the conversation, but in a more innovative and creative way and method. The second thing I would say is getting to know everyone. I would say yes, getting to know the person that you work with every day. If you're a leader, getting to know the folks that actually work for you. There's a lot of a bang for your buck you can get just by going that extra step. But the other part of that is, when you don't know everyone, just being empathetic and being mindful of the things that you say, right? So just to give you an example, one of my peers was telling me about a different service, was telling me about one of his people who went home because of an emergency, right? So just basic conversation, telling me about where the person went because they had to go home to check on a family member, or there was a death. I can't remember the exact situation. And so I said, oh, so where did he go? And he said, oh, he went to Detroit. Now, mind you, this peer of mine doesn't know that I'm from Detroit. But after he said Detroit, he said some very disparaging remarks about the city that I'm from, right? Not knowing me, He doesn't know anything about me. We see each other, we talk about work, talk about how his folks are doing. But so I had to say, so what's wrong with Detroit? Right? So that's from a person who knows nothing about me. Why should I have to say that to him when you don't know anything about me? You don't know where I'm from. But those are things that I find that it's so easy for us to do when we don't know the person next to us, and it's so easy to offend a person. You don't have to walk around on eggshells, but how about we just treat everyone with dignity and respect and be empathetic to different situations, because I don't know your background. I don't know the extent of where you came from or your family dynamics. I don't know all of those things, and I wouldn't know upon first meeting you. So maybe I should just be mindful of how I speak to you, or mindful of the things that I say to you, because I care enough about what comes out of my mouth, and I think about it first, to know that if I don't know you well enough, I could say something that's offensive. So how about I just remove those offensive things from my vocabulary just in general, if I'm talking to a broad audience or a general audience. And those are things that I just think that we can all do. We can all be mindful of how we speak to each other. We can be mindful of the things that we do say we have disparaging remarks about. We could just be mindful as people, knowing that everyone is from a different place, different location, different background, different family dynamics, different religion. We all are different, but we are in a team. So knowing that we're different in a team, that means that we should all be patient with one another, have grace with one another, be mindful of what we say to one another, and just be empathetic to the fact that we're all from different backgrounds. Our backgrounds are not equal, or the same. They're not the same. And then the last thing I would say is that we have to police each other. So along with the conversations, we also have to hold each other accountable. So I'll give you another example. So yeah, my first civil tour as a swell, it was terrible, right? It was awful. Worst thing in my career. That's what I say. But I said, you know what? When I was a division officer, I had no mentors. So I'm gonna go back to sea and be a department head, because I want to be that mentor that I didn't have. I want to be able to be that person to look out for junior officers, because I didn't have it for myself. So I said, okay, I'm gonna go back to sea, be a department head. As a department head, the conversations I had with my peers, there were some very difficult conversations, because I had one of my peer department heads, so they all were male, they were all male. He had disparaging remarks to say about one of his female officers. So I had to tell him, if I hear you say another thing about this officer, I'm going to personally file a grievance against you. Right? So when I say we have to police each other, when we hear people saying things that are incorrect, doing things that are incorrect, and we know it, instead of being a bystander and just, well, he's not talking about me, or that's not my officer, knowing that you are there as a leader, you're in the room to be able to speak on behalf of people that may not have a voice or may not be invited to the room. You're there. So while you're there, make the most of it, and be the person to hold folks accountable when they are not behaving correctly.
Thank you, ma'am. I have no words for that, honestly. Does anybody else have words? Because I have none.
Yeah, I just wanted to.
Oh, go ahead, Chief.
I'm sorry. You go ahead, C. Trevor.
Okay. Just to piggyback off of a comment that Ma'am made when she said, be mindful, like if we're offending somebody and stuff. And I'm saying this for anybody who may be listening, all of us in this conversation. If you offend somebody and they are explaining to you why they are offended, there should be really no reason why you should take that as they're trying to attack you. They're explaining to you why you offended them, how you offended them, so that way you can be aware of it next time that you might do it. Because one thing might offend one person, it might not offend me, but it definitely might offend another person. And I see a lot of cases where there might be a minor aggression that occurs, and the person that it happened to, they feel offended. And as soon as they speak up about it, the person who said it or implemented the action or the words, they start getting offended. And it's like, but why? It's like, I'm just trying to explain to you so you are mindful and you know, not like this is not something that you should say. This is not something that another person's going to be okay with. So therefore, keep that in the back of your mind. Learn how to be self-aware. And I feel like that's a big issue and a big factor in why a lot of minor aggressions continue, is because people are not self-aware. And even those that it happens to, they might not even see it as an issue. But then when you think about it, it's like, oh, yeah, that's kind of a problem. I probably shouldn't say that, especially when it comes to the way someone might look. I've heard so many things. I've been compared to so many people, and I've told you guys this story before. One time I'll have someone like, oh, I thought you was cheap. And I was like, for what though? And they're like, I was like, you saw a black person, right? Walking to you. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And I was like, and to me, I thought it was funny at first, but then I thought about it and I was like, yeah, that's probably not something they should say, because not everybody's gonna take it the way I took it. I didn't see any problem with it, but like, oh, that's going to be a problem in other people's eyes. And one instance, when another incident that was similar to that happened, the sailor came up to me the next day and was like, hey, I realized what I said. And in case it came out offensive, like, I'm so sorry. That's not what I mean to do. Like, if I say something like that again, like, please, like, let me know. So that way I don't do this instance again to someone else. And that's my little 2 cents and comment that I had to piggyback off of what Ma'am was saying.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Pastor Davis.
That basically
Sorry.
leads into what I was not as fun. I was going to lead into what I was going to say. You know, I don't think anyone at our I don't think most people want to just get people in trouble, but understand that you know, especially these conversations need to continue to happen, and as they continue to happen, you know, inevitably people will be offended. But because we're not out to just get somebody in trouble, right? And you know, Petty Officer Davis was explaining how something offended her. Well, that's an opportunity. That's her actually using what's called the informal resolution system, right? Handling it at the lowest level possible, right? If someone is offending you, I'm throwing out a number here, but I'm going to just go ahead and say 95% of the time they didn't realize they were offending you, and they maybe just needed a reminder, right, about something, you know, that they said. And probably 99% of that time, okay, roger that. I will check myself, you know, it won't happen again. But then there's that, you know, small possibility that that they don't get it, right? That's when you would go up the chain of command, right? Can you go straight to the semio if you feel, you know, you're being discriminated against? Absolutely, you can. What I encourage everyone, what I encourage myself is, but before you do that, you know, and just understanding that people aren't naturally just trying to hurt other people or get other people in trouble. Just think about it. Maybe they really did just kind of, you know, weren't thinking about what they were saying. Give them the opportunity. You don't have to, but you can out of courtesy. So.
Thank you, Chief. So gonna move on. I don't like moving on when we're having a groove in a conversation, but you know the show must go on, unfortunately. So right now there's been a lot of talk about Confederate statues. The Confederate flag, I believe personally needs to go. It doesn't need to be here anymore. But Confederate statues of Civil War generals or important battles, those kind of memorials, and even the names of our military bases and our ships. Right now, they're talking about changing that, and that they need to go. Ma'am, I would like to know your thoughts on that.
Right, I know this is a very sensitive
it's
topic.
A very sensitive.
Yeah, very sensitive topic for a lot of folks. What I would just offer, my perspective, my opinion, is that when you look at the historical aspect of why those statues, that flag, why it's being honored in the first place. So that's what I would always take it back to. So when we maintain those statues in honor of, said general that was fighting for the Confederacy with the Confederate soldiers, etc., what we are doing is we are honoring a person, number one, that was fighting against the Union. So that person was fighting against the United States, what we call the United States today. They did not want to be a part of the United States. So to me, to symbolize that in a way that honors that legacy, I think is completely opposite of what I'm in the Navy for, fighting for every day. It's the complete opposite of that. But then the other side of it is the reason that they were fighting. They were fighting so that they could maintain African Americans as enslaved people. That was the reason why they were fighting. So to ask an African American why we feel like a Confederate statue or the Confederate flag should go, to me, that question, even the question itself, doesn't make sense. Why would I celebrate a person who would have preferred that on this day today in 2020, I would still be enslaved? That's the question that you should ask, right? So why would I celebrate a person who, if they had it their way, I would still be in bondage today? No, I wouldn't do that, right? I would not celebrate a person that wanted to keep my ancestors, my family lineage in bondage. I cannot and I will not celebrate that. So in my opinion, I'm in the United States Navy today. My father fought during the Vietnam War. I have a grandfather who fought during one of the world wars as well. I have an uncle that served in the Navy, have a cousin that served in the Navy. My older sister was in the Navy. So all of us have fought for these United States. We've worn the cloth of this nation, and we fight for the freedoms of the people of this country. And so to ask me, why do I think that a Confederate flag and statue should go? Absolutely. It should go, because what they were fighting for was the complete opposite of what we fight for today. If they had it their way, my family, my ancestors, my lineage, we would all still be in bondage. So it's a very easy answer for me.
Senior, I expect it's probably a very easy answer for you as well.
Oh no, absolutely. And and that's the thing. Like I said, I spent the my formative years growing up in South Carolina, and so and I'll put a slightly different twist on it. The entire argument of, oh well, you're erasing history, or oh, you're erasing my heritage, is really a false argument. Commander Mason was talking about the civil rights movement through the 50s and 60s. When you go back and you look at the adoption of the Confederate flag, and you look at a lot of those Confederate statues, when they were put up during those civil rights movements, as a direct reflection of attempting to stop the movement, and to stop and to kind of like be that kind of bulwark of, oh well, no, we may not be the Confederates anymore, but that's what this is representative of. So when people talk about, oh well, it's my heritage, the Confederate flag that's not the Confederate flag. That was a Virginia battle flag that really wasn't adopted until much later. It's not like the Civil War ended and all these things went up. This happened mid 20th century. And and don't get me wrong, I get it. Into the Civil War, we've just spent the last couple of, what I think 4.5 years, killing each other. You're doing some of those concessions, to try to draw the country back together. That concession, 150 years ago, there's absolutely no reason why that needs to bleed into 2020. And Commander Mason's got it absolutely right. They were the Confederacy. They were trying to break away from the Union. That is not the flag we wear. That is not the flag we fight for. That's not the country we fight for. So I don't believe that there's any legitimate argument for, especially, Navy or military facilities, or, anything like that. There's no reason why, effectively, traitorous symbolism, should continue to exist, not only just within our country, but definitely not within our military like installations and that sort of stuff. Like Commander Mason said, that should have been an easy thing and should have, been settled a long time ago.
Yeah, it's I didn't give it much thought before I saw a headline, remove Confederate symbols from Navy bases. I didn't even know there were Confederate symbols on Navy bases. But if there are Confederate symbols on Navy bases, those symbols are representing the Navy. So, yeah.
I really do believe that we're all in agreement that everything that is related to the Confederacy should remain in the history books, if anything, if we even keep any form of reference to it, because they lost. Commander and Pastor Davis, if they won, we would not be having this conversation. They lost. They need to be buried in our history and remembered, so we never allow it to happen again in our history. History repeats itself if you never learned from it. And because we did not learn the mistakes in the 60s, now it's up to myself, Pastor Sorolla, Pastor Davis, to have this conversation. Because when I have my child, when my child is conceived and born and in this world, I will not tolerate any form of racism in my home, with her friends, anybody, because I was taught treat others how you would like to be treated. And I know from my personal experience growing up as a child, growing up in this world, people treated me like crap. And that's not to take away from anything that anybody else has suffered, but it has to end. Racism has to end. It absolutely has to end. With that, we have to come together, because when we all stand as one American against the evil that is this, I don't have a word for it without swearing, so this evil, this pure evil, it needs to go away. It needs to be buried and never ever seen again. And the only way we're going to do that is to talk it out. I know, being reminded not to go off script. One moment. Pastor Davis, do you have something? Pastor Sorolla?
Like you said, history needs to be there. They also need to increase what exactly is in the history books for the children in the educational system. It's crazy how most of American history is slavery, yet in school, when we're in U.S. history, it's only talked about during the month of Black History Month, which is crazy because Black people, slavery, and I'm just going to say Black people were slaves for longer than we have been free, over 400 years. So, we got to put two and two together. Don't expect people to just, stop talking about this stuff, because it didn't happen not too long ago. It didn't stop happening not too long ago. The same people that were alive during these times are still alive now. And the same people who are going through it, the same people who fought for our rights are still alive now. So I feel like that's something that needs to be taught in the educational system. 100% for sure. I don't care what nobody says. It needs to be in the educational system. There needs to be more history. If anything, even if it's not in U.S. history course, have a separate course called African history. I took an African history course when I moved to Atlanta, and that was one of the biggest eye openers yet, because they talked about numerous of things, the golden ages, the accomplishments of the Black people as a whole, creating the Kemet civilization actually created one of the first golden ages, yet we don't discuss this even in world history. we don't talk about this civilization, and that's like the basis of American people is our past, and we're not trying to go backwards, we're trying to move forward. So it's hard to move forward when we're not taught exactly what our history is to the full extent.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, and that study that you talked about earlier about the blue eyes and the brown eyes, because I never heard of that study. And that reminded me, before we came up with the idea to do this podcast, I watched an off topic from one of my favorite people to watch. And this Jeff Ramsey, amazing content creator, he went to New Orleans with his girlfriend and her family. And they were going to do a tour. I forget the name of the tour. I'm sure somebody will fact check it and let me know in the comments. But it was, they show up to the tour, and there's only black people in the tour. So the tour guide comes up and says, "Hey, I'm going to give you guys an out right now. This is going to be really uncomfortable for you." And Jeff is, he wants to better himself, so he stays. And as they're going through this tour, they would listen to the tour groups with predominantly white people in the tour group, and just to listen in, hear what they're saying. And they're talking about on Sundays how every Sunday all the black people would come into the town square. They would have and share food with one another. That was the way it was painted. But the tour guide actually pulled them all aside and said, "All right, so this is what really happened in this square on every Sunday, because that's how slaves were paid with their food. And if they didn't work, which they didn't work on Sundays, they didn't get to eat. So they all had to come together with what food they had in order to eat." And I consider myself a student of history. I love history. But to hear that and never learn about that injustice, that horrendous thing happening, it just astonished me and infuriated me to know that I never learned that about my own history. So, Chief?
Commander Mason, Senior Jagger, thank you so much for your time. I think we're about, thank you for being so flexible. I think we might be 30 minutes past our recording time. We learned, I personally learned that, well, we got to keep talking.
We can keep talking.
Keep talking.
We have this all as long as you want, Chief.
And we got a good amount of time to provide more content in the future. But for the sake of time, Commander Mason, thank you so much. And of course, Senior Jagger, thank you so much for giving us your time, for giving us the opportunity to hear your past, and more importantly, hear your personal opinions. We know what's right and wrong, right? We know what we're supposed to do. We know what governs us, but that's not all that we should know. I personally believe, to be professionals, right? It's really important for us to learn about each other, and you've given us that opportunity. So, without further ado, we'll go ahead and wrap it up.
Commander Mason, do you have any final thoughts?
I would just say thank you again for the opportunity to share. I really did enjoy the conversation in this forum. I think this is the first time that I've been a part of this type of conversation. So I would just say thank you for the innovation, and thank you for being willing to go out and do something that's very different. and put yourselves out there just to make sure that this conversation continues. And not only that, be willing to learn more about one another, so that if we do it in this forum, hopefully what that will do is ripple throughout, and others will find ways and be innovative in their own ways to have the same conversation, so that we can just get better. That's the key, right? Everyone being treated with dignity and respect at the end of the day. Everyone given the same opportunities, the same level playing field, the same opportunities for mentorship, as well as opportunities for growth and progression in their professional and personal lives. So I just really want to say thank you to all of you for putting this on. I appreciate it, and I appreciate being a part of the conversation.
Thank you, ma'am.
Senior Jag, you got anything?
No, just, thank you, ma'am, for sharing those things, because like I said, no idea how painful that is to just carry that, and to keep carrying it for, all the years that, that you do. No, I just want to leave you with two suggestions, recommendations. Have the uncomfortable conversation, because that's the only way, we get better, and that's the only way we go forward. Just keep moving forward. We are imperfect beings. We are, our institution is imperfect. We are imperfect. But just because we are imperfect doesn't mean that we shouldn't keep pushing forward and trying to make ourselves, our Navy, and our country better.
Preach, senior, preach.
So, Rolla, Davis, you guys got anything before we go?
I do not.
I just want to say thank you for being on the show, being our first guest. This was awesome. Yes, straight through. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
Hey, that wasn't that bad.
No, it wasn't. But before we all go, I got one quote, and I hope if anybody's still here listening, this is my personal favorite quote. It's by Edmund Burke, and it goes like this: "All that is necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing." So, what does that mean? In order to beat evil, we need to do something about it. So, don't let this conversation die out.
Good people, right?
That's correct. And that would be number one, Mike Mute. Cue the outro.
All right, take care, everyone. Have a good and safe weekend, and we'll continue the conversation.
Thanks again for listening to What the Navy. Please like and subscribe. We are striving to create a place for everyone to feel that their voices are being heard.
If you want to be on the show or have something you would like to talk about, please send us an email at whatthenavy@gmail.com. A link will be in the description.
If you enjoyed this show, please leave a comment letting us know what you liked. If you found something you didn't like, please leave a comment for that as well.
Our next show will be here live on YouTube at the same time next week, and we'll eventually be able to post this onto Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts once we figure that out. Thanks for watching.